What was that? I'm sure I saw something in the water. Whatever it is, it's getting closer. And it's hungry. What was that thing? Where did it come from? And why was it such a threat to humans? This is What If, and here's what would happen if the Titanoboa was alive today. About 60 million years ago, one of the Paleocene's deadliest predators could be found stealthily slithering around the waters of South America. The Titanoboa. Discovered in Colombia, its official name is the Titanoboa cerejoniensis. With a length of 15 meters and weighing just over 1,000 kilograms, it would be almost 3 times the size of a giant anaconda. If you're a person of average height, its 1 meter girth would be as high as your waist. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, you'd be most likely to find a Titanoboa when you're both hunting for fish or swimming. It's a matter of physics. Moving around in the water is much easier for creatures like huge whales and this snake, rather than being on land. And although living in trees has never been an option for this great snake, it could trek inland on occasion. Scientists are speculating that it belongs to the snake family called boids. They're non-venomous snakes, which sounds pretty safe, but Titanoboas might use teeth to grab a hold of their prey. And it's been said that the teeth can bend, like curved hooks sticking into you. The more the prey struggles, the more it gets hooked. Then they squeeze their prey. After a few minutes, ischemia happens. Blood flow to the heart or brain is restricted, causing a shortage of oxygen and eventually death. Fossils show that a Titanoboa's lower jaw extends past the back of the skull, giving it a greater range of movement when opening its mouth. It could swallow you in one piece. Titanoboa probably fed on giant turtles and primitive crocodiles, which were about 6 meters in length. A snake this size would probably have to eat about 40 kilograms of food every day. That's twice as much as an anaconda. These snakes are killers that can move easily in water. Humans might be an ideal snack. Places such as Australia seem to coexist with dangerous snakes, but the sheer massiveness of a Titanoboa would dwarf anything we're used to. Titanoboas would prefer a hot, damp, jungle-like area like the Amazon. Snakes rely on heat from outside their bodies to survive. About 58 million years ago, Titanoboas lived in an environment about 5 degrees warmer than it is today. Maybe we'd find these giant snakes in Asia, or what about a place like Florida? It's sweltering and humid for part of the year. Because of its massive body, roughly the size of a small car, it would most likely hide in hot, swampy areas or lakes. This allows it to hunt more efficiently. Alligators lounging along golf course lakes are common in Florida, and the Titanoboa could easily be attracted to this food haven. And if there are no alligators on the menu that day, what would be the next best option? Yeah, golfers. I bet you're wondering if there's any benefit to having Titanoboa around. Well, yeah, pest control. Raccoons, deer, or anything ripping through your garbage would no longer be an issue with a Titanoboa on the lookout.
Taller than a 6-story building. Longer than 3 school buses. 10 times as heavy as an elephant. The largest dinosaur ever is coming back from extinction. What would life be like walking among these giants? How could we possibly tame these creatures? And how would they threaten to destroy human society? This is What If, and here's what would happen if the Argentinosaurus was alive today. In 1987, a farmer in southwestern Argentina made a discovery that shook the paleontology world to the bones. 6 bones, to be more precise, and they seemed to come from the largest dinosaur to have ever existed. Argentinosaurus, or Argentine lizard, lived during the Middle Cretaceous period, about 90 million years ago. They were herbivorous sauropods. That means that they subsisted on a diet of plants, and their bodies had distinctly long, massive necks and tails. And when I say massive, I mean massive. Though they'd start their lives as small as 5 kilograms, over 40 years, they would grow to be around 75,000 kilograms. At the peak of their growth, they could have gained around 40 kilograms every day. Whoa! That means these dinos likely had a never-ending appetite that required 100,000 calories daily. So, if they were alive today, would they eventually eat every plant and crop on the planet? If the Argentinosaurus managed to stage a comeback, they'd discover that their old stomping grounds in South America would look very different than they did so many millions of years ago. The ecosystems that exist in this part of the world are completely different than they were then. This would pose a problem for the voracious leafy appetite that the Argentinosaurus had. And they wouldn't be the only ones with an ecosystem headache. You would too. They would eat so many of our trees that they could completely alter the world as we know it. Along with their eating habits, these creatures would bring chaos and destruction everywhere they went. Paleontologists suggest that these dinosaurs were a towering 17 meters tall and spanned 35 meters in length, which is a size that continues to baffle scientists, who wonder how the creatures could have managed to hold up their own giant necks. It's estimated that their hearts would have needed to be able to pump blood as far as 12 meters, about 50 to 60 times every minute. Combine their stature with their astounding weight, and they destroy just about everything in their path. Homes, infrastructure, people. It would be kind of like Godzilla, only more by accident. Especially if there were more than one Argentinosaurus. And you better believe there would be. With these dinosaurs roaming around, you could expect to come across one of their nesting sites on your next hike. Argentinosaurus was an egg-laying species, and females could have laid anywhere from 10 to 15 eggs at a time. And these wouldn't be anything like your average chicken eggs. They'd be as large as 30 centimeters in diameter. It's likely that you'd need to come up with some ways to contain their growing population size. Soon enough, they could lay so many eggs that all of South America would be overrun by big dinos. If only there were a way that we could tame them, like elephants, and use them to our advantage. But this would be a pretty dangerous task, considering their size. And not to mention our lack of knowledge about how temperamental they could have been. Besides, the conditions we'd need to keep them in would likely be inhumane. It would involve keeping them in contained areas that aren't large enough to sustain them. But of course, we couldn't let them wildly roam the planet wherever they wanted. I mean, that is if you wanted to keep living on this planet too. you'd hopefully see conservation efforts to provide an area for them to wander about and live peacefully. Though coming up with a system to actually contain them would be a tough task. Electric fences could be effective, as the Argentinosaurus lacked natural body armor, so they'd be vulnerable to shocks or injuries. But if they gathered in herds, as paleontologists suggest they would, then even more space and kilometers of electric fences could be necessary. But this would also help to protect them from poachers looking to hunt down the biggest game known to man. It would especially protect the babies, who would be left to fend for themselves as soon as they were born. Sadly, reintroducing the largest dinosaurs to ever exist would ultimately lead to yet another attempt by humans to conquer everything in nature. So maybe we meet our match with a dino that has a little more of a craving for our tasty human flesh. Like if the T-Rex suddenly came back from extinction.
Could a monster be lurking in our oceans? And no, we're not talking about the Loch Ness Monster or the Megalodon. We're talking about a creature you've probably never heard of. The Mosasaur. But what's a Mosasaur? Could the Mosasaur have survived the Great Extinction? And if it did, how would it change our oceans? This is What If, and here's what would happen if Mosasaurus were still alive. In 2014, a British tourist spotted a strange creature while on a cruise ship in the Gulf of Mexico. It became known as the Carnival Cruise Monster. And the description sounded a lot like a long-extinct apex predator, the Mosasaur. But if the Mosasaur had survived the extinction event, which killed off 3/4 of the plant and animal species on Earth, then we'd definitely know about it. It would have completely changed what our oceans look like and how we use them. In fact, if the Mosasaur was still roaming our oceans, the Megalodon might never have existed. But how can one animal have such a huge impact? These nightmarish marine animals were actually giant lizards, kind of like the land-dwelling Komodo dragons, but they evolved for life in the ocean. Their anatomy made them dangerous predators. Imagine a lizard monster with the double-hinged jaw of a snake, massive teeth, and a tail like a shark. Oh, and they could be as large as 18 meters long. That's 4 meters longer than your average yellow school bus. They basically ate anything they wanted. No fish, dolphins, sharks, whales, or even other mosasaurs were safe. Fossils from this species have been found on every continent, including Antarctica. Evidence that these lizard kings dominated the oceans in the Cretaceous period. But they weren't all so ferocious, with some species being as small as 1 meter long. Then, how did they become so terrifying? Their ancestors were more like the marine iguanas living on the Galapagos Islands today. Around 90 million years ago, these lizards would have ventured into the ocean for food. At first, they stayed close to the shoreline, but as they evolved, they started to make the open ocean their home. The evolution of their powerful tail vertebrae made them skilled and speedy swimmers, helping them move further away from the shore. But they also remained close to the surface because, like dolphins and whales, they needed to come up for air. It only took 27 million years for the Mosasaur of Jurassic Park to evolve. Of course, the Mosasaur in this movie is not very accurate. Even though a real Mosasaur was smaller than the one in Jurassic Park, it was still a very dangerous creature. If this species were alive today, it would completely alter our oceans. But why would it change them? And how would it affect the way we use our oceans? Much of the marine life we know today probably wouldn't exist with the Mosasaur inhabiting our seas. They just wouldn't have stood a chance against this mighty foe. Instead, the fish and mammals in our oceans would look and act much differently than they do today. They would have adapted special traits and methods to avoid the Mosasaurus. One ecological theory is that predators actually drive evolution because they force prey to adapt, and quickly. In fact, a 2007 study found that the diversity of marine creatures over the past hundreds of millions of years is directly tied to interactions between predator and prey. So, our oceans might actually be even more diverse if the Mosasaurus still existed. But what about us? Well, this giant lizard would make the oceans a much more dangerous place for humans. We would need much larger boats. Small fishing boats and sailboats could be swallowed whole by this creature. Ocean hobbies like sailing and fishing wouldn't be as popular, and swimming and surfing would certainly be life-threatening. And maybe the story of Moby Dick would be about a menacing mosasaur instead of a whale. Thankfully, mosasaurs do not exist today, or our oceans would look completely different, and that's a good thing. If the Mosasaurus were able to survive extinction, what's to say other species couldn't survive too?
How cool would it be to see a real-life T-Rex? If only that one fatal asteroid never hit the Earth. Would dinosaurs still be alive today? Would they have evolved? Would humans have survived this long? Could we ever learn to coexist? This is What If, and here's what would happen if dinosaurs never went extinct. Until 66 million years ago, dinosaurs of all shapes and sizes roamed the Earth. Intelligent, adaptable, and sometimes weighing as much as 2 jet planes, it's hard to believe that it only took one rock to wipe them all out. Of course, this was no ordinary rock. The asteroid that took out the dinosaurs was 9 miles wide and hit Earth with the destructive force of 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. The radioactive shockwave obliterated everything for hundreds of miles in every direction, and 75% of all species on Earth went extinct. If that asteroid had hit just a little earlier, a little later, or even a few miles off course, we would be living in a very different world today. The rock that killed the dinosaurs struck the shallow waters of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. Had it landed a little farther off the coast, in a deeper part of the ocean, the water might have absorbed some of the blast, along with its devastating effects on the atmosphere. But even if the asteroid missed the Earth, dinosaurs would have to survive several significant global events in order to make it to the present day. 55 million years ago, temperatures rose. The climate was 8 degrees hotter than it is today. Rainforests sprouted, and vegetation flourished. Herbivores would have adapted and thrived, but they'd have started to look a little different. The plants of this period were less nutritious and easier to digest, meaning dinosaurs would likely shrink in size, since their new diet wouldn't have as much energy. Roughly 20 million years after that, South America and Antarctica split, creating a cooler and drier world climate. During this period, long-legged, fast-moving dinosaurs would have evolved to travel the huge grasslands stretching out across the globe. Compared to mammals of this period, dinosaurs held significant advantages, such as having more teeth and better eyesight. Considering the dinosaurs were already so advanced, scientists wonder whether mammals would have evolved at all if dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct. It's likely that the big animals we know today would have been prey to dinosaurs. But remember, humans evolved alongside woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats. While those species didn't survive the ice ages of 2.6 million years ago, given the evolutionary traits of some dinosaurs, there's a chance they might have persisted. But what about us? Could we handle freezing temperatures and huge, terrifyingly vicious predators? They say running keeps the body warm, but that might also make you taste better. In an alternate universe, if we did survive alongside these prehistoric beasts, it's possible we could see a real live T-Rex on a protected reserve, not unlike Jurassic Park. Human population growth and excessive hunting would have driven larger dinosaurs to near extinction. Today, they would most certainly be an endangered species, but those that shrank and adapted over millions of years could coexist peacefully among us. In fact, some actually do. Where do you think pigeons came from? It's hard to believe that birds were once the size of biplanes, but then again, it's hard to believe that with a slight twist of fate, we might have walked with dinosaurs. Or we might have become dinosaur chow and not have evolved at all. But seeing is believing at What If? So if you've got a passion for the incredible, then keep watching.
An ancient creature is lurking in the ocean. It's double the size of a T-Rex. Its gigantic jaws could crush a car. And now, it's on the hunt for you. Megalodon sharks haven't existed for more than 2 million years, but today, we're bringing these apex predators back to wreak some havoc. Now, some people believe megs never went extinct. Instead, they're hiding in the deepest depths of our oceans. The Mariana Trench. Well, if the Megalodons were still around, that would be the last place you'd find them. That's because these prehistoric tyrants hated cold water. They preferred the warmer waters of the Mediterranean and the Caribbean. They also loved to explore the coasts of Australia and California. If these predators were around today, they might seriously ruin your beach vacation. But if they spotted you swimming in the ocean, they wouldn't just attack right away, and this has to do with your size. Megalodon sharks were gigantic, at least 16 meters in length, so they needed a lot of food. Scientists estimate that megs ate about 1,200 kilograms of fish every day. To hit their caloric intake goals, they even dined on sea mammals like whales and dolphins. So you, puny human, might not be worth their attention. Unless you were hanging out with a group of friends. Now, that's a worthier snack. And the Megalodon could devour you and your friends all in one bite. Ooh, and let me tell you, these predators had gigantic, sharp teeth. Each one of the Megalodon's teeth was as big as your hand, and unlike us humans, megs kept producing new sets of teeth every week or two. In their lifetime, they'd go through up to 40,000 of them. If they never went extinct, you could find those all over the ocean. You could find some huge carcasses too, but that wouldn't happen all too often. Scientists think that megalodons had a lifespan of up to 100 years. But, even if humans weren't on the megalodon's menu, their enormous appetite would hurt us in other ways. With this huge new predator in the oceans, there'd barely be any fish left for us. And not because their boats wouldn't catch anything, but because they would, and then megalodons would hunt them down, attack, and eat everything in sight. It's not clear why megalodons disappeared these millions of years ago, but it could be because the oceans got too cold for them. Well, now they'd be in for a treat because our oceans are warming up. Thanks, climate change. Megalodons would thrive and reproduce. You'd see more and more of these predators showing up. They'd be disrupting our shipping operations and potentially bringing an end to the cruise industry. But eventually, they might die out once again after they ate whatever they could in the ocean and had nothing more to feed on. Or maybe the rise in global temperatures would hurt us so much that we'd be the ones to go extinct.
Sometimes it's nice to just kick back and take it slow. Really slow. So, what if evolution had the same mindset and decided to take its time before getting rid of some prehistoric creatures? What if the giant sloth was still around? what would it get up to in the 21st century? Could modern-day humans even handle giant sloths? And what does this have to do with my guacamole? This is What If, and here's what would happen if giant sloths didn't go extinct. Giant sloths are a lot like their modern-day descendants. They were slow, harmless, and, well, adorable. The key difference was that they were bigger, and I mean a lot bigger. The largest of these tardy titans would have reached up to 7 meters tall and weighed in at over 6,300 kilograms. Giant sloths evolved in South America about 35 million years ago. And thanks to several specimens we've found in good condition, we have a pretty good idea of how they lived their lives. That is, until 11,000 years ago when they went extinct during the Ice Age. But what if that wasn't the story? What if they stuck around? Well, if they were still alive, they would live in forests or bushy areas found in North and South America. These forests would be their vegan buffet. Giant sloths were herbivores that could stand up on their hind legs to grasp tree branches with their thick claws and snack on leaves. Some of them even had tongues similar to giraffes and could use them to reach the extra tasty leaves. Delicious. It's a pretty good skill to have because these gentle giants would need to eat about 60,000 calories per day. That's as much as an African elephant's daily meal plan. So it sounds like even in the 21st century, giant sloths would have a pretty relaxed lifestyle. But what would it be like for us? Well, knowing humans, we'd probably give them a job and use them for labor. The giant sloths might be used as transportation, at least until we realized that that idea sucks. Hope you're not in a hurry. Some giant sloths were the size of an ox, so they might be able to help us out on farms. By using the old carrot dangling in front of their face trick, we could have them plowing fields. But is anyone really going to invest in a work sloth? I mean, they're not really known for their speedy work ethic. There's gotta be something else they could do. Well, it turns out their biggest contribution was avocados. Yeah, avocados. People love avocados, but the giant sloth really loved avocados. They would eat about 200 avocados per day. It's estimated that if 80,000 giant sloths roamed the earth, they would eat as many avocados each year as are consumed in the entire United States. I hear what you're saying. How is eating so many avocados a contribution? Well, get this. Have you ever heard of Kopi Luwak? It's the most expensive coffee in the world. Kopi Luwak is made when civet cats eat coffee beans, allowing their internal enzymes to seep into the beans, creating more amino acids and shortening the peptides. This changes the flavor of the coffee. And then, they poop it out. And people buy it, and they think it's a delicacy.
It's a bit nutty.
We might be able to do something similar with the avocado pit. Considering the avocado pit is much larger, we could be looking at a good investment here. Could guacamole made from the avocado seeds deposited by a giant sloth become a delicacy? You could start a gourmet avocado farm with a bunch of sloths eating and pooping out avocado seeds. It would be a great way to start production, as you wouldn't be lacking fertilizer.
That is one big pile of
Now, while it would be amazing to have eco-friendly giants helping us with our farms, sadly, it's only a dream. Giant sloths are long gone, and unless we do some huge genetic experiments, they're gonna stay that way.
A team of Russian scientists is working hard to resurrect this quintessential Ice Age behemoth.
Give me a high five.
But what if they never disappeared in the first place and still roamed the Arctic regions on Earth? What would they eat? And would we hunt them for their tusks? How would they have adapted? This is What If, and here's what would happen if mammoths never went extinct. These shaggy-haired herbivores are cousins to the modern-day Asian elephant. Weighing in at almost 6 metric tons and around 3 to 4 meters tall, they were similar in size to the African elephant. Still large, but not as mammoth as we like to imagine. Woolly mammoths only went extinct about 10,000 years ago. Their fossils are found across North America, Asia, Europe, and Africa. So, what happened to them? Woolly mammoths were built for sub-zero Arctic habitats. A main reason they were able to thrive during the Ice Age was because of a particularly quirky circulatory flow. Their countercurrent system feeds venous blood through the heart and lungs, and arterial blood through the legs and feet. This is opposite to how human blood circulates. Their blood itself was also special and kept oxygen flowing at frigid temperatures, sort of like antifreeze in your car. This unique blood system allowed them to stay warm in ice-cold weather and operate off of limited calories while still conserving heat and maintaining blood flow. It didn't hurt that their exterior hair could grow up to 1 meter long. Woolly indeed. So, is climate change to blame for their extinction? Scientists haven't come to a conclusion yet. It's still debated whether climate change, which altered their ecosystems, or humans, who hunted them, were the driving factor of their annihilation. Probably a little bit of both. But what if they somehow survived? Our Arctic regions would look a lot different. And not just because there would be jumbo-sized, shaggy animals roaming around. There would be less elk, moose, and caribou because the woolly mammoth would outcompete them for food. Woolly mammoths ate around 225 kilograms of plants daily. They would sweep aside snow with their giant tusks to access grass compacted under permafrost. This grazing style creates a cycle that favors grassland over the current Arctic tundra. The soil compaction of large mammal grazers allows for deeper freezing in the winter. This prevents the release of greenhouse gases because firmer terrain keeps grass from totally thawing during the summer. Woolly mammoths themselves would look a little different if they still existed. They'd have to adapt to warmer temperatures and beat out their rivals, the other grazers. Being brawny gives animals dominance over a landscape, but it also requires much more food, which is a vulnerability. So woolly mammoths would be smarter than they used to be, and maybe lose some of that thick blanket of fur with increasing temperatures. They'd also be a target for the ivory trade. In Siberia, melting permafrost is unearthing woolly mammoth tusks, which are worth around $1,000 per kilogram. Highly sought-after ivory is exported to China, where it's used for traditional medicine, ornaments, and jewelry. In order for the species to survive in the wild, they would require legal protection and enforcement. Even with protection, their population would be low. A female mammoth is not sexually mature until age 15, and her pregnancy with one calf lasts 22 months. While woolly mammoths don't actually exist today, scientists from around the globe are trying to bring them back. This process is called de-extinction and uses resurrection biology. None have been completely successful, yet it still begs the question of whether we should be trying. Although it sounds cool to potentially see these amazing creatures back on our planet, we can't know the ripple effects it may have on ecosystems. And fictional warnings aside, humans don't have the best track record for reviving past creatures. Jurassic Park, anyone? A better use of our energy would be to make sure their endangered cousins, the Asian elephants, continue to have wild habitat to survive and are kept safe from illegal hunting.
What do saber-toothed tigers, woolly mammoths, and the dodo all have in common? They're all extinct. And some theorize humans played a large part in this. What if we could apologize for our wrongdoings as a species and bring these creatures back? Is it scientifically possible? And would humans remain at the top of the food chain? This is What If, and here's what would happen if extinct animals could be brought back to life. You know, one day, this might not be a hypothetical, as science is getting closer to bringing extinct animals back. Known as de-extinction, it's the process of bringing extinct animals back from the dead. What used to be science fiction is slowly becoming a reality. It is possible that this might happen one day, but unfortunately, you won't be seeing any dinosaurs. Why? Well, that's because in order for this de-extinction process to work, a species' DNA needs to be of a certain age. Scientists say that DNA becomes unreadable after 1.5 million years. After that amount of time, it's practically useless. So the dinosaurs that went extinct 65 million years ago are ineligible for this experiment. Sorry, guys. But if the species is young enough and the DNA happens to be readable, then scientists can use it for genome editing. One of the ways this could work would be using the DNA from extinct species and fusing it with its closest animal relative currently living today. One of the animals that scientists say is eligible for de-extinction? The woolly mammoth. Small mammoth populations were still alive just 3,600 years ago. Experts believe that this species could have survived extinction if it wasn't for the humans hunting them. One potential way mammoth de-extinction could work is if scientists were to combine woolly mammoth DNA with that of elephants alive today. Over time, these hybrid animals could slowly morph into full-on mammoths, effectively bringing the species back. This might take a few thousand years, but over time, mammoths could be roaming the earth again. If this method were to work, think of all the incredible animals we could have back in our world. The 12-foot-tall giant short-faced bear, hairless dogs, and of course the lovable dodo bird. Just remember to be wary of the saber-toothed tigers that would be running around. You don't want to mess with those. If we wanted to get weird, we could even bring back Neanderthals, although that could be incredibly dangerous and would ultimately be a stupid idea. This species would die pretty quickly, as they just wouldn't be able to survive in our current world. With our diets, germs, and diseases, Neanderthals wouldn't last long. That goes for all these other animals we're bringing back too. Sure, in theory, they should be able to adapt over time, but there are tons of other issues that may come with bringing a species back from extinction. One thing we'd need to be worried about is just how do we control these species? We wouldn't want a giant short-faced bear mating with other bears. That could present a number of unknown issues. But what's to stop them from doing it anyway? Another question science would need to ask is, what exactly is the point of all of this? Sure, being able to ride a woolly mammoth would be amazing, but is it really worth it? What kind of purpose are these animals serving other than for the sake of our entertainment? And there exists the possibility that these new animals would disrupt the current ecosystems we have today, leading to other animals going extinct because of them. One good thing de-extinction could do is bring back essential animals that we have today that may become extinct. Bees have long been talked about as a species that may go extinct relatively soon. If de-extinction technology is finally realized, maybe we'll never have to worry about it happening. But that also raises some concern. If that was our reality, People may think it was okay for things to go extinct, since we could always bring them back. This could cause an increase in hunting and a general carelessness for animals around the world. Bringing back a species may sound like an incredible idea, but the risks and unpredictability of it are huge. Maybe it's just best to take care of what we have now and make sure it doesn't happen again. What if everyone and everything went extinct but you? Well, that sounds like a question for another What If.